Hey guys, it's Sign here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're doing another manga review. Today we're looking at Mashle arc number 6, which is contained in most of volume 9, all of volume 10, all of volume 11, and a tiny little portion of volume 12 there. So yeah, this is the Magic Tri-Athalon final exam arc, which is a unnecessarily long name, but basically it's like the big event of the year that's been kind of what everything is culminating to, finally coming to a head and being competed in, right? And because it's kind of like the Tri-Wizard tournament, there's 3 different schools and they have to compete for something, right? So that's kind of the basic idea behind the arc. So the author here is Hajime Mokoto. Let's see, is that true? Yes, sorry, Komodo, not Mokoto. Hajime Komoto. And it's published by Viz. Here's what it looks like on the spine. Pretty good stuff. I love how these books look. Although it feels like there's a lot of, overused colors. They actually all end up being different, even if they look similar at a first glance. So I appreciate that they look like they're supposed to be a certain way and they actually aren't, and it makes it better because I like when the covers are colorful for them to all be different, right? I don't like repeating colors. So yeah, and the demographic here is shonen. Of course, it's a shonen Jump title, and the genres here are fantasy, comedy, and action. This was supposed to be a gag manga that eventually ended up turning into an action manga. Just because that's kind of how the wind blew for Hajime here. And it does have an adaptation. I know that the opening song is very popular. I like it a lot. But I'm not really sure that the anime is that well regarded. I can't remember really anyone talking about it all that much. But I know that it was available. I think the most popular thing that came out of it is for sure the opening song, right? So yeah, ratings wise, it's a 4 out of 5. And premise wise, like I said, this is basically just the final portion of the divine visionary kind of concept, where this is when the 3 different schools that all make up the wizarding world, or the magic world of Mashle, are competing against each other, right? And so Mashle has to compete against them, even though he is clearly not supposed to even be in the challenge, right? So there's a lot of elements like that going on. Alongside that, there's this secondary storyline behind the scenes that is concerning the fact that Mashle's father is the big villain, the big bad guy of this world, and one of his siblings is in the other school competing to be the divine visionary, because by winning this tournament, they get access to a special wand, the Wand of Origins, I think is what it's called, and this should give Mashle's dad, who I can't remember the name of, or Mash's dad, I think his name is Innocent Zero. It should give him basically unlimited power, or close to, right? Close to that. So the characters don't want that to happen, right? So there's a lot riding on this. So yeah, let's get started here with a plot line. The chapters covered here are 75 to 102. I feel like it would have been perfect if it ended on 100, and kind of does, but for whatever reason, the arc did end up going 2 more chapters beyond that. I don't think that, Hajime was planning to do any of that, but it did almost line up perfectly, so that's cool. So it starts with Mash, Dot, and Lance all being the finalists for the tournament, right? They're the best students in their year at what's it called, Easton Academy, something like that. And they have interviews that they have to pass, and these interviews are actually fight challenges where they have to fight against previous divine visionaries, or at least that's what it seems like, because that's what Mash had to deal with, because Mash gets attacked by this werewolf thing that's a servant, that's something between Dobby, Professor Lupin, and like a mascot character from Fairy Tale. He's like those 3 things combined, and it's pretty cool, but also kind of like weird. Like it almost kind of comes out of nowhere, but we get introduced to the concept of servants, and this one happens to have some werewolf type powers. And Mash and the creature, the servant, come to an understanding because, similar to Harry Potter, Mash believes that this creature is sentient and has rights and everything the same way he does. And by treating it nicely, he gains its its loyalty to some extent, right? But once they come into an understanding and the creature or the servant no longer wants to fight Mash, Oster Madl, M-A-D-L, shows up, and he's like, since this creature doesn't want to fight you and you're not going to give up, I guess I'll kill or hurt the creature every time you don't take one of the hits that I'm sending at you, right? And so they have this big, awesome fight. It seems like Mash is going to lose when Renatus, who is another Divine Visionary guy, steps in and forces Oster to back off. Mash is then allowed into the exam, and we'll have to fight for the Wand of Beginnings or the Wand of Origins. I think Origins sounds cooler, but I think it is called the Wand of Beginnings, which is basically the equivalent of the Elder Wand, right? And then we transition to kind of elsewhere, kind of an unknown location, where Domina Blovaliv, who is Mash's brother, beats up the students from St. Ars, which is the other school that is competing in this, right? And he's actually really badass and really cool, and he beats up the St. Ars students because by forcing them to not show up to the challenge, they can cede their seats over to Domina's school, and so they have a better chance of winning because even though Mash doesn't have magic and Dot and Lance are not, well, Lance is pretty good, but Dot is kind of inconsistent, they still want to stack the deck against them, right? To stack the deck in their favor, I guess is actually what they want to do. And so he's badass, he's awesome, very interesting. And we move on to another scene where we see the opening ceremony for the final exam. We get introduced to the 3 delegations, but St. Ars backs up, and Walkis, or Volkis, I guess is how you would say it, is going to take over the seats, even though it should have been divided between the 2 of those schools. And so Walkis or Valkis or whatever you want to call it now has 6 people competing. And the fighting starts. Even though the ceremony should not have any fights, we get to see Abel, Abbas, and Macron show up to defend our characters from the battle. And now that there's a 6-on-6 competition, the tournament continues, but the only people from Eastern Academy that can exist in the tournament and actually move on are the 3 characters that were already allowed to be in it. Abel, Abbas, and Macron cannot advance. They're only there for support, right? Which is pretty interesting. I think it's kind of crazy. So they show up to help the boys. Before the tournament starts, we see that there are riots at Eastern Academy. People don't want Mash to even exist. They think that he is an abomination, a problem, a concerning situation, right? Lemon decides to stand up for him, and I think this is inspired by when Ochako stands up for Deku in My Hero Academia. I'm not really sure. I feel like they were happening around the same time, but maybe I'm wrong about this. But the thing is that Lemon is not really an important character, and even though Mash is important, even though there's like societal pressure for him to not exist, it's broadly speaking pretty minimal. Like, that's not really the point of the story. And so this kind of stuff happening really makes no difference. Like, there's no emotional attachment that I feel to this. And so this is just kind of a way to take up time or take up space for the story, and I don't necessarily like it. Lemon stands up for him. Wahlberg shows up and disperses the crowds. And then we get introduced to the Mash and Domina origin story. Apparently they're siblings. They basically, even though they're not twins, they're the same age. And they were raised together to an extent while they were children. Domina has basically the magic that, Mash should have had. It's not explained that way, but it almost feels like Domina has so much magic power because he has all of the power that was his and Mash's, where Mash has all of the physical strength because he has all of the physical strength that is his and his brother's, right? It almost feels like, is it supposed to be magic goes to one sibling who has light hair and is frail, and Muscles goes to the other sibling who is dark-haired and physically fit, right? At least that's what it looks like. And it turns out that Domina basically is a prodigy, and magically, and Mashle Mash is a prodigy physically, and Domina basically just strives to gain his father's acceptance, whereas Mash, sorry, I want to keep calling him Mashle. I know his name is Mash, not Mashle. It is what it is, but Mash was secreted away to exist in the real world, away from his brother, who wanted to basically destroy him for existing because he was a crazy child. And so the final exam finally starts. They're at this place called Griff Manor, and they had to find 5 stars to unlock a special chest. Once they unlock this chest, they will find the wand. And so the first trial is basically a fight against a Lethifold or a Dementor or whatever you want to call it. And Mash wins by choke holding it crazily, and I think it's really funny. I really enjoyed it, but it was not an exciting fight because Mash is obviously going to win. And so there was really no stakes to it. Then Walkus goes too far ahead. They're winning because they're all significantly much better at Magic than everyone else at Easton. And so what the Easton boys do is break the wall across the manor and actually just bum rush the Walkus students. And so the battling starts properly at this point because they ignored the rules of the game, which, is good because it makes the story more interesting, but it's bad because why do you even bother to set up that story point then? And so there's this ice guy, there's this bug guy. Mash plays pool with them in a really ridiculous manner, but it's really, really funny. I love it. I think every time Mash does a stupid gag in order to win, and it just works because he's so much more physically fit than everyone else, is hilarious. I love this part of this story. I really find it amazing. It's very, very funny. Then Mash has to fight this guy called Levis, who and basically it's muscles versus magnets. And of course, there's a lot of back and forth here where it seems like Mash is going to win, and then Levis is going to win, and then Mash, and then Levis, and then Levis overpowers him because he unlocks all of his, second and third abilities. And then Mash is basically, Levis applies so much magnetism to Mash that he basically bans him to the Shadow Realm. And within the Shadow Realm, Mash has to constantly run, and then Dot decides to fight Levis. And this other guy that shows up who has some other ability, I can't remember what it is, but so Dot has to fight them to free Mash. And well, even though Dot has a lot of power, he actually is not very good at his magic, and so he basically gets demolished by these guys, but he decides to keep standing up, and they get frustrated with the fact that he doesn't die, which I think is pretty funny. Lance gets to fight one guy, and he gets one key out of it from this weird mama's boy wackadoodle guy who basically doesn't even have a magic fight with him. They basically fight over which one of them is weirder, where Lance thinks that being a mama's boy is weird, whereas the mama's boy thinks that Lance being a siscon is weird. And I think that honestly, they're both pretty bad, but Oedipus, like the Oedipus complex kind of idea, it's a lot more understandable and Jungian and like realistic than like being in love with your little sister, which I don't know why Japan really finds hilarious or important or meaningful. I guess it's just because they don't have big families. It's a weird thing that they do. But I don't like either of them. I don't like either of the concepts. But I'm happy Lance won, and I thought the fight was kind of funny in the sense that like the idea of it is humorous. The execution is not, just because I don't like either of the stereotypes, right? Or the character types that they use. So they have a weird game of whack-a-mole, and Lance wins. Dot gets the key from Lance. Then he blows up Levis, but it just doesn't work correctly. So he has to distract them. Gets the key again, or another key, and then Mash gets unlocked from the Shadow Realm. He comes back, and he beats up Levis, and it's really, really awesome. There's this scene here where Levis uses a railgun because he has magnets abilities, so railguns are like the coolest way to use magnets. And Mash gives him validation after he beats him. And this actually changes Levis from a bad guy to sort of a good guy, I guess, because that's Levis's whole desire. He wants someone to acknowledge him. Then it's time for the final battle. It's muscles versus water. I'm not really sure why Domina has water powers. I guess it's because if Innocent Zero has space powers, the closest thing to space in like concept would be the ocean, and I guess that's why he has water powers, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Abyss is cursed to fight Mash, and he breaks it just out of sheer willpower, I guess. Mash skips stones to hit Domina across all of the water that Domina brings. Then Domina unleashes his second ability. It's countered, and Domina freaks out and unleashes even more magic, summoning Poseidon. The same way that when Innocent Zero and Wahlberg fought, he summoned Jupiter, right? Or, sorry, Kronos. It's the same kind of concept, I guess. And I actually guess that means that Innocent Zero's powers is time, not space, but time and space are basically the same thing within Einstein way of looking at things, right? So I guess it makes not much of a difference there. And Mash unleashes his muscle power. He basically does a Rock Lee where he takes off his weighted training material, and he gains immense physical ability due to not being bogged down by weight anymore, right? This fight ends up being really, really awesome. It turns out that Domina has a complex. He was raised to fight and raised to expect or desire praise from his father, but never get it. And so he must win or be useful to be loved. That's kind of the idea that Domina has lived by. And when Mash beats him and accepts him, Innocent Zero shows up, and he's like, well, looks like Domina failed. I don't need him anymore. He's not valuable to me anymore. He is not deserving of my love. And this breaks Domina completely. And Mash is too weak to fight Innocent Zero, but another character shows up whose name is Doom, who happens to be Mash's oldest brother. Doom is the first son of Innocent, if I remember correctly. And then we have a cool fight between Mash and Doom, where they basically kind of reach some sort of understanding where Doom doesn't want to kill Mash, but he's excited to fight him again, essentially. Domina is expelled from the family by Innocent Zero, and he sacrifices himself to save Mash because Mash is the only person that ever accepted him and basically seems to have loved him unconditionally just for existing, right? Then the story ends, or the arc basically ends there, but there's 2 extra chapters that explain to us what's coming next. Innocent Zero calls a family meeting in order, and we get introduced to 5 brothers who are going to be lead in the next arc here, which is the end of the story, right? So overall, really, really enjoyable. There was 2 or 3 different issues that I had with the story, but they're not really meaningful issues because even though I mentioned them here and make them seem like they're a big deal, while I was reading, it wasn't a problem. It's just looking back on it, I noticed that these issues exist to an extent, right? So yeah, in terms of characters, we have Mash here, who has a Rock Lee power-up, which is really awesome. We get this guy called Levis Rose Quartz, who is an electro magician. Basically, he has electromagnetic powers. We have Domina, who has water powers, and he summons Poseidon. And then we get introduced to Doom, Epidem, Famine, and Delis, and Sasser, I think is what they're called. And so basically you have Doom, Epidermis, Famine. I don't know why Epidermis is a guy, or I guess he might be epidemic instead of epidermis, right? Which means that they're all basically the four horsemen of the apocalypse, but because they wanted more siblings, they have to find a way to deal with it, right? So there's disaster as well, and it's all pretty cool. I really enjoy the element here of the story where all of the brothers get introduced, but I'm not really sure that it was necessary to introduce so many characters right when the end of the story is coming up, right? Like the story only lasts 18 issues, where, starting issue 12 when this starts, maybe they didn't need to have that many characters, right? But I think that that's just kind of par for the course for manga. It is what it is. So yeah, in terms of world building, we get introduced to the Wand of the Beginnings. We understand how people become divine visionaries properly now, although it almost seems like it doesn't matter. Like, there's basically going to be one person that's going to be so much more powerful than everyone else, and he should just get elected. Like, they should just have a machine that measures magic potential and just get that person to be the winner, right? Because otherwise, there's like a billion ways in which they can stack the cards against each other, and it's not really objective, right? Like, the point is to have the greatest student, the greatest potential, and I guess someone with low magic potential but high mental potential could win, but that goes against the magic strength is might kind of idea that exists in this world. So I don't know. Also, it very clearly is one of these like power begets power kind of concepts, where the wand of beginnings is afforded to every person that wins this divine visionary thing, and because they get it, they gain more power, and so they become even more representative of the idea that magic strength is everything, right? And so it just seems like the whole society is going to collapse eventually, and MASH is just kind of making that faster. And we get introduced to Innocent Zero's children, and because we're introduced to them, we get to learn that elves exist, that trolls exist, that goblins exist. I think there was like multiple magical creatures that we'd not seen before that get explained to us as existing through dialogue and interactions with these characters, which is pretty cool. Not that important because that's not the main crux of the story, like that's not what the story is about, but it is pretty interesting to know that these basic understandable magical creatures exist within the world, even if we've never really seen them. So yeah, artwork and fan service wise, it's really, really cool. There's no fan service, but there's a lot of references to other media that you'll probably enjoy if you're a fan of other Shonen Jump titles, right? So that's kind of fan service in some way, but when I say fan service, I mean like, you know, ecchi content, right? So yeah, ratings wise, a 4 out of 5. I think it's cool as fuck. Like, it's really, really enjoyable, but the magic doesn't really make sense. Why is it that one person can just summon God and other people can't? And what defines what magical affinity each person has, and why? And does that mean that basically schooling is irrelevant because every person learns different things? Or is there like a standardized version of magic that everyone can use? And then on top of that, they have their, you know, elemental affinities. Like, I don't understand it. It's never been explained properly, and it doesn't really matter because that's not the point of the story. But it bothers me that it's so inconsistent because random people pull random shit out of their ass all of the fucking time. And like, you know, electromagnetism is like a fundamental force of nature. Why is that less powerful than water? Like, you know, like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't really make sense. Like, if you arrange all of these affinities, I feel like there is a clear hierarchy that is not observed. And I don't understand why. Maybe because there is no god of electromagnetism, and that's why it's not as powerful. Because there is a god of water. There's billions of gods of water, right? Like, every culture ever has a god of water. But no culture has a god of electromagnetism, right? Because that's not really a thing that people understood to exist. And like, what counts as electromagnetism is kind of split across different gods. You know, like if Poseidon is the god of earthquakes, or, you know, Hades is the god of the underworld, maybe Hades takes on the electromagnetism aspects that relate to forces attracting, and then the like actually electrical part goes to Zeus, right? Like, you know, it doesn't make sense. I'm trying to find a way to editorialize it so it makes sense to in my head, but it just doesn't. I don't understand why water is more powerful than electromagnetism in this case. So it is what it is, I guess. And the idea of what's it called, like elemental affinity, like checks and balances never comes up, even though they clearly would be, right? Like, Dot would be less effective against the water mage because anytime he explodes, people would be able to douse the explosions with water, right? Or things that cover it, right? Like, maybe a wind mage might be better than Dot just because they can blow the explosion away. And why is explosion a thing? Like, why is that an elemental affinity? That's not, there's nothing that just explodes by existing, right? Like, there is no fundamental elemental, like, element that explodes constantly, right? So I don't know. It's really weird. So it just doesn't make sense. And that bothers me a little bit. Well, actually, it bothers me a lot. But It's not really a problem while I'm reading. It's a problem when I'm trying to understand the world after I've been reading, right? Like after I finish reading for a while and I think about Mashle, I'm like, why the fuck does this not work the way that it should? And it's just because Hajime Komodo probably didn't think about it that hard, because that was not the point of his manga initially. It was just to have a funny gag, right? And so I think it's a bit of a mess, but it is what it is. Overall, it's very, very enjoyable regardless. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Mashle, arc number 6, the Tri-Magic-Athalon final exam. So yeah, let me know what you thought down below. What do you think about Mashle? Are you enjoying it? Are you excited for the last issue or the last volume to come out here soon? I think it comes out in December. So yeah, let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you guys later.